I am Serafina. I am 28 years old, I live in Portland, Oregon, and I bought my first home with money I earned entirely by myself. No loans from family, no help from anyone. And the moment I posted one single photo online, my entire family lost their minds, not because they were proud, but because I had not handed it over to my sister. Before I tell you everything that happened next, drop a comment telling me where you are watching from right now. If this story sounds like something you have lived through, or something you cannot believe is real, hit that like button and subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. Because what this family did after that photo went up is something I still have to remind myself actually happened. I need to give you the full picture before I get into what happened, because without it, none of the reactions make sense. I have owned a small specialty gift and home decor shop in Portland since 2021. I opened it without borrowing a single dollar from my parents. I worked early morning shifts at a bakery before my shop opened and took on weekend retail work for almost a year straight just to build up enough savings to cover the deposit and first few months of operating costs. Nobody handed me anything. I did not ask anyone to. My parents live in Seattle with my older sister Thalassa, who is 32. Thalassa has a 6-year-old daughter named Eloin. Thalassa and Eloin's father split up a few years back, and since then Thalassa has been living with our parents while she figures out her finances. I understood that. I never had a problem with that arrangement. What I had a problem with, even if I never said it out loud, was the pattern that existed long before any of this started. When Thalassa dropped out of college and wanted to go back 2 years later, my parents paid her full tuition with no expectation of repayment. When she got pregnant and her boyfriend left, my parents moved her back into the family home and covered everything: rent, groceries, childcare, all of it. When I asked my father in 2021 if I could borrow $15,000 to help launch my shop, he said, and I am quoting him directly, "You are smart enough to figure it out on your own." I never received $1. I figured it out on my own, exactly like he said. For 3 years I saved aggressively. I cut every expense that was not necessary. I tracked every dollar coming in and going out. I worked extra hours consistently. By the time I was 28, I had saved enough to put a down payment on a 2-bedroom house on the east side of Portland. Small house, nothing fancy. But it was real and it was mine, and I had earned every square foot of it. The day I signed the closing paperwork, I sat in my car in the parking lot of the title company for about 10 minutes. I did not cry. I just sat there and felt the weight of what I had done. 3 years of work. 3 years of saying no to things I wanted so I could say yes to this one thing. I drove to the house, stood in the empty living room and took one photo. My hand holding the key, the bare walls of the room behind me. I posted it to Instagram with the words, "First home." All mine. I did not tag a location. I did not mention the address. I did not write a long caption. It was a personal moment I wanted to mark, nothing more. Within 20 minutes, my phone started ringing. My mother called first. I answered because I thought maybe, just maybe, she was calling to say she was proud of me. She was not. The first words out of her mouth were, "Why did you not buy that house for Thalassa?" I did not know what to say to that. I genuinely did not have a response ready because I had never once imagined that question would be asked. I told her it was my money. I told her I had been saving for 3 years. I told her this was my home. She did not listen to any of it. She talked over me and said that Thalassa needed a house more than I did, that Eloin needed stability, that I was young and could keep renting for a few more years, that if I truly loved my sister, I would have thought about her first. That call lasted 45 minutes. My mother did not ask once how I felt. She did not say congratulations. She did not acknowledge the 3 years of work behind that key in my hand. Less than an hour after that call ended, my father called. His tone was different from my mother's. Where she was emotional, he was cold. He told me that in a family, you help whoever needs it most. He said I had more than Thalassa did, and therefore I should be willing to give. He said that a person who truly loves their family does not think of themselves first. When he got to the part where he said that if I really cared about my sister, I would not have made this choice, I put the phone down on the counter and let him keep talking to an empty room. When I picked it up again a few minutes later, he had hung up. By that evening, messages started coming in from relatives I had not spoken to in months. Aunts, cousins, a great uncle I had not seen in years. Every single one of them had the same tone, the same words, the same message. My mother had told them I was selfish, that I had promised to give the house to Thalassa, and then backed out at the last minute, and that I had devastated my sister and her daughter. Not one of them called to ask me if any of that was true. The morning after I posted that photo, I woke up to a notification that Thalassa had posted a video on her social media accounts. I watched it. She was sitting in front of her camera with tears running down her face. She said that her younger sister had promised her a home, that she had planned her entire next chapter around that promise, that she had even started thinking about which school Eloin would attend in the neighborhood. She said I had taken that away from her at the last moment and left her and her daughter with nothing. There was no promise, there was no conversation where I said anything close to that. There was no text, no call, no email where I made any kind of commitment to her about any house. None of it happened. But the video had 400,000 views by the end of that day. My own Instagram post started filling with comments from strangers and from people I actually knew. Some of my former college friends, a few people from my hometown, all of them going in the same direction. How could you do this to your own sister? How could you let your niece suffer? What kind of person are you? I turned off comments. I locked my direct messages. But messages still found their way through via shared accounts, via email addresses connected to my shop, via mutual contacts. 3 days after the video, Thalassa launched a GoFundMe page. The title was, "Help me and my daughter find safe housing after being abandoned by family." In the description, she wrote that her family had made promises they did not keep. That she and Eloin were in an urgent situation, that she had nowhere to turn. Within 1 week, that page had raised more than $15,000. People I knew personally had donated without reaching out to me once. Then the private messages from Thalassa started. At first they were angry. Then they shifted into something that made me stop and put my phone down for a long time. She started sending messages late at night saying she did not know what to do anymore, that she was exhausted, that she could not see a way forward. The messages were vague enough that they could mean many things, but they were specific enough that people around her got scared. Her friends started calling me, asking me to do something, telling me I needed to step in. I did not respond to Thalassa directly. What I did was contact a mental health support line and explain the situation. The person I spoke with gave me specific guidance on how to respond when someone sends messages like that without putting myself in a position of being manipulated and without dismissing a genuine concern. I followed that guidance. I documented every message with timestamps and kept them in a separate folder. Then the community got involved. My mother had contacted the church our family attended when I was growing up in Seattle. Several older members of that congregation reached out to me directly. One woman called my personal cell phone and spoke to me for nearly an hour. She told me that a truly good woman would not leave her sister without a home. She said the family was praying for me. She said she hoped I would find it in my heart to reconsider. I listened to the entire call without arguing. I thanked her. I ended the call. Then I sat down and added her name and number to my documentation file. During all of this, I kept my shop open. I kept showing up. I answered customer questions and packaged orders and swept the floor at the end of the day. But every night I came home to that empty house and spent at least an hour going through messages and recording information. I did not know exactly what I was building toward yet. I just knew that something was coming that would require proof, and I was not going to be caught without it. 12 days after I posted that photo, I received a physical envelope in the mail. Inside was a cease and desist letter from an attorney representing Thalassa. The letter stated that I had violated a verbal agreement to provide housing, that Thalassa intended to pursue legal remedies if I did not enter into negotiation, and that further public statements on my part could constitute defamation. I read it 3 times. Then I noticed what was missing. There were no dates for any alleged conversation, no names of witnesses, no specific location where any agreement was supposedly made, no details at all, just sweeping language designed to sound official and threatening without actually containing anything that could hold up anywhere. I kept the letter and added it to my folder. A few days after that, my father sent me an email with a PDF attached. The document claimed that he had invested $25,000 into my shop in 2023 and that this investment had not been repaid. It had a signature on it that was meant to look like mine. It was not my signature. I knew this immediately. I do not sign my name the way that signature was written. More importantly, I had the bank records to prove that no such transaction ever happened. My shop's business account had never received any deposit from my father. What actually happened in 2023 was the opposite. My father called me asking to borrow money because his car needed major repairs. I lent him $4,000. He had not paid me back. I printed the email and the attached document. I pulled 2 years of business bank statements. I set them side by side. Then I made an appointment. During this entire period, the people around me in Seattle had almost entirely chosen a side, and it was not mine. A woman I had been close with since college sent me a message saying she had heard multiple versions of the story and did not know who to believe. I wrote back one sentence: "When I have documentation, everything will be clear." I did not explain further. My parents contacted me 3 more times during this stretch. I did not answer any of their calls. I did not reply to any of their messages. Every communication went into the folder. I found Nikolai through a referral from a business contact who had used him in a contract dispute. I brought everything to our first meeting: the cease and desist letter, my father's email with the fake document, my complete business bank statements from 2021 through the present, every screenshot of messages from Thalassa and my parents, the police report number from a noise incident that had happened at a family gathering, and the documentation log I had been keeping since day one. Nikolai went through the folder without saying much. When he finished, he looked up and said, "They made a very serious mistake sending you that document." He explained each piece clearly. The cease and desist had no legal foundation because there was no written agreement and no credible evidence of any verbal one, but the document my father sent was in a different category. A forged signature on a financial claim is not a family dispute. It is fraud. Nikolai told me that if my father submitted that document in any legal proceeding, it would open him to criminal liability. He advised me to stay quiet publicly until he had sent the appropriate notices. I agreed, and I left that meeting feeling, for the first time in weeks, that I was not standing alone. 8 days after I retained Nikolai, Thalassa showed up at my shop. It was a Saturday morning. The shop had several customers inside. Thalassa walked in, raised her voice, and told everyone present that I had stolen a home from her daughter. She said I was not who I pretended to be. She said the people in my shop deserved to know what kind of person they were giving their money to. I did not raise my voice. I told her clearly and once that she needed to leave. She did not move. I called the police. They arrived in 15 minutes and filed an incident report for disorderly conduct at a place of business. Several customers left during the incident. 2 of them came back later that day and told me directly that they had watched what happened and they believed me. 2 days after the shop incident, I came home at lunch and found Eloin sitting outside my front gate with a small backpack. No adult was anywhere nearby. I crouched down to her level and asked if she was okay. She told me her mother had driven away and told her to wait because her aunt Serafina would take care of her. I called Nikolai first. He told me exactly what steps to take. I called the local Child Protective Services line and reported the situation. I called the police to document it. I stayed with Eloin the entire time, sitting on the front step with her until the authorities arrived. I did not contact Thalassa. I did not contact my parents. The people with authority over that situation were the ones I called, and I let them handle it. When Thalassa found out I had contacted Child Protective Services, my parents called repeatedly within the same hour. I did not answer. My father sent a long email saying I had turned a family matter into a government matter. I forwarded it to Nikolai, who responded to my parents directly in writing, informing them that all future contact with me must go through his office. After Nikolai confirmed that my legal position was solid and that the notices to Thalassa's attorney and to my father had been sent, I made a decision. The GoFundMe was still active. Thalassa's video was still up. People were still donating based on a story that did not happen. I felt a responsibility to correct the record, not to win an argument, but because real money was changing hands over a lie. I put together a post on Instagram. I did not write paragraphs of explanation. I posted images, a full screenshot thread of every private message between me and Thalassa, showing not one instance of any promise about any house, a scanned copy of my father's document with the forged signature, clearly labelled, the case numbers from both police incidents, 2 years of business bank statements with a typed note explaining that no deposit from any family member appears anywhere in those records. The caption I wrote was short: "This is what actually happened. You can judge for yourselves." The comments turned within hours. People who had donated to the GoFundMe started posting on Thalassa's page demanding answers. Others shared my post without me asking. By the following morning, the GoFundMe page was gone. I do not know whether Thalassa removed it or whether the platform took it down. Either way, it disappeared. Then something happened that I had not expected. A man named Dominic, who works as a real estate agent in Portland, sent me a direct message. He told me that he had been the listing agent who showed my house to a group of buyers before I made my offer. He said that group included my parents and Thalassa. They had toured the property. They had seen the asking price. They had not made an offer because they could not afford it. And then I had bought it. That explained everything. They had already wanted that house. They had already walked through it. When I posted that key in my hand, they recognized it immediately. The explosion was not about principle. It was not about Thalassa needing a home in some general sense. It was about that specific house, which they had already decided they wanted and could not have, and which I had gotten on my own. Dominic said he was willing to make a statement if needed. I passed his contact information to Nikolai. Nikolai used Dominic's account of events to strengthen the notice he sent to Thalassa's attorney. He made clear that any continued legal pressure would be met with a full response that included the forged document, the police reports, and the witness statement from the real estate agent. Within 1 week of that notice, Thalassa's attorney sent a single paragraph stating that the cease and desist had been withdrawn and the matter was considered resolved. There was no apology in that paragraph. There was no acknowledgement of anything that had been done, just one sentence saying it was over. I read it once and put it in the folder with everything else. A few weeks after the withdrawal letter arrived, I bought paint and spent a weekend doing the second bedroom in my house. I had originally planned to use it as an office, and that plan had not changed. I chose a pale green, a color that nobody in my family had an opinion about because nobody in my family had been consulted. I worked slowly. I did not rush. I rolled the paint onto the walls in long, even strokes and thought about the past several weeks without anger and without rehearsing arguments I never got to finish. I just let myself think about it clearly. My mother called about a month after everything ended. She used a normal tone of voice, as though she were calling on any ordinary afternoon, and asked if I wanted to come up to Seattle for a family dinner that weekend. No mention of the cease and desist letter. No mention of the forged document. No mention of a loan being left outside my gate. No mention of any of it. I watched my phone ring. When it stopped, I deleted the voicemail without listening to it. Not out of anger. I had already decided, somewhere in the middle of all of that documentation and those late nights, that silence without accountability is not the same thing as peace. A dinner invitation is not an apology. And I was not going to walk back into a dynamic that had never once treated me as someone whose feelings, work, or decisions deserved basic respect. Some of the people who had reached out to me with judgment during the worst of it contacted me afterward. A few of them said they had seen the post and were sorry for jumping to conclusions. I accepted those apologies without putting a lot of weight on them in either direction. I kept a little more distance than before with the ones who had been loudest in their judgment, not as punishment, but as information. The way a person responds when they only have one side of a story tells you something real about them. Dominic's name never ended up in a courtroom. Nikolai's letters did their job, and the whole thing collapsed before it needed to go further. I paid Nikolai his fee and thanked him. He told me I had done everything right from the beginning by documenting instead of reacting. As for Thalassa, I have not spoken to her since the morning she walked into my shop. I do not know what her current situation is. I do not check her social media. I think about Eloin sometimes and I hope she is okay. She is 6 years old and she did not choose any of this, and what was done to her that afternoon outside my gate was not something I had any control over, but it was also not something I will forget. My shop is still open. My regulars came back. A few new customers have come in and mentioned they heard about what happened and wanted to support the business. I appreciate that, though I would rather people come in because they like what I sell. The house is mine, 4 months in now. The office is painted. The kitchen has things in it that I chose. The front step where I sat with Eloin that afternoon is the same front step where I sit sometimes on weekend mornings with a cup of coffee before the day starts. I do not have a dramatic conclusion about my family. I do not have a revelation about forgiveness or a clean lesson that wraps everything up. What I have is a house that belongs entirely to me, in a city where I built something from nothing, and a very clear understanding of what I am and am not willing to go back to. That is enough for right now. And honestly, some days it is more than enough. If you have ever been in a situation where your own family made you feel like your hard work belonged to everyone except you, leave a comment below and tell me about it. I want to know if this is something other people have lived through, because for a long time I thought I was the only one. If this story hit close to home for you, please give it a like. It genuinely helps more people find it, and some of those people might really need to hear that they are not alone in what they are going through. Subscribe so you are here for the next one. I have more stories coming and I promise none of them are quiet. And if you know someone who is dealing with family pressure over money or property or choices they made for themselves, share this with them. Sometimes it helps just to know that someone else got through it. Thank you for being here and for listening all the way to the end. I hope wherever you are and whatever you are carrying right now, you have at least one space in your life that is fully, completely yours.